Hello there, and welcome back to Morning into Dancing, the show that's inspired by the ever-present grace of God in my life, as I have learned and grown after a terrible childhood in a really awful, reclusive, abusive, neglectful cult. It was called the Foundation Faith of God, if you're curious. And this show is about how I have learned and grown because of the grace of God in my life. I take the name of the show from Psalms 30, verse 11, where it says, "Thou hast turned for me my mourning into dancing." I kick off this episode like I kick off every episode, and that is to say, we are 100% able to have our trials, our difficulty, our losses, all the mourning, all the challenges, all the fire of life be a refiner's fire. We don't see it refining us if we don't look closely sometimes. We don't see the hand of God in our lives if we don't know how to recognize it. So this show is here to try to help everyone see the hand of God in your life. And the hand of God is called grace. The grace of God in our lives. So I hope that this episode and the previous episodes and the episodes that come later will be inspiring to you and will inspire a deep introspection so that you can start to see how He's turned your mourning into dancing. How His grace has absolutely lifted you and strengthened you. I may have mentioned it before. I see the grace of God as like a spiritual healing factor. Our bodies heal from injuries most of the time. Not everybody's does, but our default state is that our bodies heal from injuries and from illness. One example is that one of my sons, he's had a terrible sore throat and been sick for the last week or so, but he's getting better. And that is the usual default tendency of humanity, of the children of God, to get better. That's a biological imperative programmed in us, right? Well, I believe that grace is that spiritual imperative for us to get better. It's always there, and we can access it more if we will do our best to turn to God. So I look forward to talking to you about today's episode. Today's episode is called What Rocky Did for Me. That's right, what Rocky did for me. What Rocky, you might ask, Jared? Well, Rocky the movie. That's right. We're going to talk about Rocky the movie. And really the whole series, the whole franchise of Rocky, starting with the movie Rocky and then Rocky 2, 3, 4, 5, Rocky Balboa. And we might get into the Creed franchise, but I probably won't. So this seems maybe like a secular topic, but I want you to know that, truth can be circumscribed into one whole. Some of us have probably heard something like that. God is the source of all truth, and even truth that doesn't look like it came from God, like it's coming from some secular side, it came from God. And everybody has the light of Christ, right? Everybody's got the light of Christ. So everybody has an entitlement to have some inspiration in their life and some guidance from God in their life due to the light of Christ. And everybody's got the light of Christ because we're all His children. I believe Sylvester Stallone didn't understand what he was creating when he wrote the script for Rocky. I don't think he understood the lasting impact that movie would have on so many things. Our overall culture, our movie culture, on people's lives, how inspiring it would be and how huge it would be. I don't think he had any idea how huge it would be. He was a down on his luck actor at the time. He wasn't doing too well. And he wrote that movie in, I think, 2 weeks or something like that. But I want you to know my experience with Rocky and how it's been a huge blessing to my life, especially because of the cult I grew up in. Now, what the interesting thing here is that as I look back and I try to figure out when I first saw Rocky, I can't remember. I can't remember the first time I saw Rocky. I can't remember the first time I saw Rocky 2 or 3. I can remember when I saw Rocky 4 and 5, and I 100% remember when I saw Rocky Balboa. But the first and second Rocky, I don't remember them very well. I don't remember, I remember them very well because I've seen them so much, but I don't remember a first time seeing them. I do remember seeing them a second and a third time and saying, oh yeah, I knew all this. So how could a movie that I don't remember even the first time I saw it have such an effect on me? I don't know. Something iconic, something universal about what's happening in there. But as we know, Rocky is about a down on his luck fighter. Well, not down on his luck, but just not a very successful fighter. He's goes by the name Italian Stallion. He lives in Philadelphia. His best friend is kind of a drunk who works in a meatpacking plant. His best friend's sister is this lovely woman who works in a pet store, and Rocky's got a big crush on her, played by Talia Shire. Burt Young, of course, played Paulie, and Burt Young, of course, passed away recently. He's a very good actor, boy. Easy to hate Paulie, and that's because Burt Young was a good actor. So what happens here, of course, everybody knows what Rocky's about, right? This guy, he barely wins in a fight, but it's because he loses his temper and he wails on poor Spider, right? And Mickey, his trainer, calls him a bum, and he says basically you could have been a contender, as if he didn't say you could have been a contender, but the implication of his words to Rocky is you could have been a contender, like we hear from Marlon Brando on The Waterfront. But yes, I see movies. I love movies. So, out of nowhere, Apollo Creed, who's the biggest heavyweight champion, he gives Rocky a shot at the title just as kind of an exhibition to get some publicity and to make a lot of money. And Apollo's a very finely crafted fighter. And Rocky goes for it, and they go toe-to-toe the whole show. But it's not about boxing. It's about this man who's given an opportunity kind of out of nowhere, an opportunity he didn't really necessarily deserve, but it turns out it's the exact opportunity he needed in order to become the best version of himself. I want to talk about Rocky for a little while and I think that in the talking about it, it will become clear why this movie was so important to me and probably to you, or at least to people you know. So Rocky Balboa, he's a fighter. He's not doing too well. He's an enforcer for a loan shark guy who turns out to be a big supporter of Rocky throughout his journey. And so he goes around and he's a collector and enforcer. He goes around and he threatens people and does injuries to them to get this guy's money back. But he's also kind of soft. He won't break the fingers that he's supposed to break. He won't, do the damage that he's supposed to do necessarily because he just feels empathy for these guys. He sees why they're down on their luck. He's not making good money. He lives in a terrible, terrible hovel, but he's just making a life. His routine is simple, but he's kind of accepted his fate as just a guy who has dreams that were too big for what he had the capacity to fulfill. He always wanted to fight. He knew it was in him to always want to fight and for that to be his life's work. An expression of who he was, essentially. He wants a family. He wants to marry the woman he loves. He wants a family with her as well. And he wants a peaceful life. But there's a lot outside of his control. The economic circumstances that he was born into and raised in, outside of his control. The job market that he's in, kind of outside of his control. It's hard to get a job. It's clear, the way the movie shows this takes place in the real world where, and at that time it was quite difficult. Sorry, I just kicked the camera. It was quite difficult to get a job sometimes. And so, he's just taking what he can get and not really moving forward in dreams so much as just kind of living each day by each day, getting what joy he can from each day and being as a pretty good dude each day and controlling what he can control more or less each day, but not really looking past that, not really looking to where he could start to shine. Now, obviously, we know that the story that I just said, he's given the opportunity to stretch in a way that he never would have stretched before. So for one thing, for Rocky, that opportunity helps him to move forward in a new way. The thing is, Rocky always had that ability in him to move forward, to start living in a different way, to start fighting with more heart, with more passion, with more drive, and with more self-belief as well. And really, the self-belief it never really comes until the second movie. He will train, he'll work hard, and he believes in Mickey, his trainer, and so he does what Mickey says, and he believes in how much he loves Adrian, but he doesn't really believe in himself so much until the second movie. But if he had a knowledge of who he was, a child of God, and if he had, a belief in himself and his own abilities, and in how much Heavenly Father loved him and how much he could do with his life, he probably, in an alternate world, Rocky didn't need the movie, right? This character, this being, this person, should have been able to stretch their stride, lengthen his stride, and move forward. But the catalyst, or the kind of catalytic event, you could say, is that Apollo calls on him. And so then Rocky starts to trust more and follow the more Mickey. Now Mickey's motivations are murky too. I'm not going to do an analysis of the whole movie, but we establish in the opening 10 to 20 minutes that Rocky's a person, we all kind of know people like that, and we have been that person sometimes. Maybe not as physically fit as Sylvester Stallone. I've never been that fit. I've been pretty close when I was younger. But, we can easily just identify with this everyman, he talks kind of funny. He's got his own things. He's not the smartest guy on the block. He's kind of awkward with Adrian. He just, I just think, maybe we could go out and get, do some ice skating. I don't know. And his proposal in Rocky 2 is hysterical. Some of us weren't good at our marriage proposal, so it's nice to see a bad marriage proposal in a movie sometimes. Weird, actually, how similar my marriage proposal to my wonderful wife it turned out to be, how similar it was to Rocky's terrible marriage proposal in a snowed out zoo in Philadelphia. But that's off course here. Well, not entirely, but it's movies like Rocky, and the way they create them is to help us see that, this could be us, this is us, or this is our family, this is our friends, this is our kids. So we can very easily identify. We have access to it. Rocky is easy to identify with, especially in the first movie, because he's so grounded in the grungy reality of life. And he's got regrets, for sure. He's got regrets, and he's certainly given up on his dreams by this point. He just wants to, like I said, live his life, have a family, marry this beautiful woman that he just adores because she's awesome. Adrian's really neat. She's very quiet, of course, but she's neat. So I see myself there. I see, when I'm a kid, I see a guy who doesn't have a lot of control over the circumstances that he's in, but starts to realize he's got some control over how he handles those circumstances, what he does to cope with the circumstances, the hand that he's been dealt. And what he does is he says, I'm better than I am right now. I can be better than I am right now. If I work hard enough, I can prove to myself that I'm better, that I can be better than this, that I can achieve more than this by working hard and by starting to really establish a belief in who I am and what my potential is and how I can even meet that potential through steady work. And so he does. We see some training, we see the running montages, we see the lifting and the push-ups montages, which are really fun. And there was about 10 seconds in my life I could do a one-handed push-up. Boy, that was a good time. So he does. He trains. He becomes physically much more fit, and he learns to fight better. And he goes toe-to-toe with Apollo Creed. And of course, as we know, neither of them gets knocked out. It's a split decision, and Apollo wins through the split decision. And if you're into boxing at all, it's not very good boxing in the sequences of boxing. It's not very good at all. Got to keep the hands up, protect your face, keep your elbows in. Anyway, this isn't a boxing movie. It's about belief in oneself. It's about controlling what you can, or at least starting to exert control over what you can, and finding that as you do that, more becomes under your power or in your power to control. And that's great. So what did this story do for me? Well, it showed me first myself as if I were an adult in circumstances outside of my control. And then it also showed this man digging deep, pushing hard, and not winning the match, but winning the competition against himself. Because life isn't actually a competitive race or a match with other people, right? There are business dynamics that probably some of those are races for some such thing. But overall, life isn't a race. So those metaphors that we see out there, those videos or those messages that say, oh, it's a race, Those are wrong. They don't understand what life is. Life is not a race with others, nor is it even a race with ourselves. It's simply a journey. Life is a journey, and it's a marathon, and it's a sprint, and it's a 5K, and it's a weightlifting competition, but it's with ourselves. And in the case of those of us who understand, it's with God. And even if you don't understand or believe in God, your journey is still with God, because he's still your Father in heaven. No matter what you believe, that doesn't change the reality of God's existence, right? So, I think it's interesting, because we if we look at the movie closely, we see that Rocky was not actually fighting Apollo. Rocky was fighting himself. Rocky was fighting his own laziness, his own lack of belief, his own kind of giving up on his dreams, his own despair, and his own nature in many ways. So me seeing him do that and be successful in overcoming himself, and then starting to be able to exert control on the world around him, was powerful. I didn't quite understand what was happening then when this started to kind of have an effect on me. But as I've thought about it, I've definitely understood that that's what was going on. I saw myself in him, and I thought maybe I could do some of that myself. And then there were some real physical and specific results of the movie Rocky. Number one, I've grown to have a lifelong love and respect for boxing. Boxing is brutal. It's crazy that we do it. But I respect what happens, the process that goes into preparing for the ring, and what goes on in the ring as well. I respect it, and respect the men and the women who do it. I don't ever actually want to be a boxer. I don't want to hurt people. Boxing isn't about hurting people, of course. Boxing is about perfecting your craft and so many other things. But this isn't a boxing video. Let's just like Rocky's not a boxing movie. Boxing is simply the metaphor, the platform upon which it builds its story. So in any case, specifically what I started to do was actually take control of myself physically. By the time I saw that movie, or at least I started having an effect from that movie, I must have seen it when I was 14 or 15 then, huh? Because I got into physical fitness pretty quick after it. Maybe it was 14. By the time I was 14 or so, I had been receiving cash from my grandmother, my mother's mother, for many years, and for my birthday and for Christmas. And sometimes I'd save up for some stuff. I bought a Walkman with it once. A Walkman. Haha. It played a cassette tape. You know what I'm talking about, right, guys? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, and in that Walkman, I put tapes that I had purchased with money from my grandmother, and also tapes that I had recorded stuff from the radio to listen to, like Starships songs. And anyway, so enough of that silliness. But yeah, I bought fun things with it sometimes, but most of the time I frittered that money away on treats. I've had a preoccupation with sweets my whole life. And if you're listening to this, you can't tell the result of that. But if you're watching this, you can see the result of that. I'm at an unhealthy fitness level right now, unfortunately, because of that. Such is life. Candy doesn't have any moral value to it, and my choices about it don't have any moral value or judgment to it. I just need to continue to work on my appetites. So that's great. But I had an unhealthy appetite for these things when I was a kid at that time as well. And so I was getting really unhealthy. I was getting very soft, very round. I couldn't do much physically, and I was in my teens, which is a sad thing, right? And I felt very self-conscious about it. And then Rocky, showing that, that you can take charge of this if you just work at it, inspired me to give it a try. So I did. And when the house that I lived in Dallas at the time, in this branch, so as I mentioned in a previous episode, I think the first and second episodes, pretty much all the kids wound up in the Dallas chapter, the Dallas branch of the Foundation Faith of God, which later became Best Friends Animal Society, right? And ultimately all the boys lived in one house, and all the children, teens and stuff, lived in one house, and all the girl teens, children and stuff lived in another house. Segregation, because they were hyper paranoid about any kind of sexual relationship forming between us kids. Whatever. Whatever. So in we lived in a house on the corner of Dickinson and Hood in Dallas. The house is gone. It's apartments now. I looked it up on Google Maps a while ago. It's near Turtle Creek Boulevard and Lemon Avenue. It's less than a mile from the Oak Lawn branch of the Dallas Public Library System. I read just about every book in that library. Like, no exaggeration, for real. All the comics several times. They switch them out regularly, which is good. All the fantasy, all the science fiction, just about. All the romance, all the espionage, so many books. I read so many books. Anyway, so behind the house and that we lived in, the boys lived in, was a garage, a ramshackle, running down, falling down garage that nobody would trust to put a car in. But we got the garage door working. For a little while, it was actually mechanical. We could get it just to boom, but not for very long. We were able to get it open and close it by hand. And in that garage was a bike graveyard, and there were some crummy weights that were just kind of strewn about. And some of the young men that I was growing up with had put together a relatively okay set of weights, and somebody had scrounged up a weight bench, where you lean back and you do your bench presses and stuff. And that was pretty impressive. And I saved up a little bit of my money that I got, and I bought one of those speed bags, but I had no idea how to use the thing. So I actually hung it from a rafter in the garage and just punched it. And it would swing for a while, and I punch it again. It's not how you use a speed bag. But I started using the weights. I started availing myself of those good weights that were in there. And I also went ahead and cannibalized many parts of the bike graveyard and was able to put together a functioning bike off of, I think I took apart 3 or 4 different bikes for this, put it all together, lubed it all up, got it all working well. This is an older style bike, right? Just, put the pedal in reverse, and that's how you brake. No gears or anything like that, just a simple single speed bike for a kid. I got it fired up. I got it working really, really well. And then I bought some spray paint, again, with some of that cash, and spray painted it completely black. I freaking loved that bike. I was proud of that bike. Oh, what a cool bike. Anyway, so I started not just biking to and fro to get places, but also for exercise. And I'd biked for a long time. And I started jogging. And I would try to jog in the cold so I could emulate Rocky with his running in the cold, and Philly with a beanie on and stuff like that. And I started lifting weights really regularly. I would work out for 2 hours sometimes every night. And I'd take breaks by climbing into the rafters and reading a book up there. Crazy, right? So I started actually physically training myself. And it took a couple years, but I got into a physical fitness level that I was really, really proud of, to the point where it's interesting about what happens when you take charge of your physical health. You build confidence. Now, I think that team sports are a really good avenue for that, but I never really had the opportunity for that, so that didn't really apply for me. But building muscles, reducing the excess fat on my body, improving my cardio, my heart health, becoming physically fit and being able to move with some smoothness and some strength, and being able to lift heavy things, being able to feel strong, feel capable, and up to whatever task life might throw at me, was significant. I was an introvert. I've talked about that. I was very, very shy, and my self-esteem was crummy, truly crummy. I mean, I spent so many years of my life just convinced that something was wrong with me. And I only really, really gained a certainty that there's nothing really wrong with me just a couple years ago. While academically, philosophically understanding that was the case, I only really gained a deep, true knowledge, a testimony, you could say, of the fact that there's nothing wrong with me just a few years ago, even after being called as a bishop, because my understanding was incomplete. But our understanding can be complete without our true knowledge, our feeling about that knowledge, and our deep absorption of that knowledge being complete, right? So anyway, what a blessing that was, while still being quite shy and in my own shell and a loner by decision, by choice, to become more physically confident, to be able to walk around with some physical confidence, not hunch, not be afraid of people. My fear of people started to go away because I knew that I could not be hurt by the people who were hurting me emotionally and spiritually and stuff like that, and verbally. They couldn't physically harm me. And as I realized that they couldn't physically harm me anymore, like, one of them tried, and I was like, are you seriously going to try to spank me? I'm 16 years old. It was a failing prospect for them, and my confidence had them stop. What a wonderful thing that happened after that, because as I started to gain that confidence and that understanding of how I didn't have to be afraid, and I was physically capable of things, I started realizing that I could also be not emotionally afraid, that I didn't have to be hurt by the things that they would do and say. And by the, the instability and how I couldn't trust anybody. There's nobody really I felt like I could trust, right? So the physical development turned into led to emotional development, to the point where I was able to, because of that emotional development, where I took control of my emotional state and started looking at my emotional reactions with more honesty and more understanding and a desire to improve and change. I was able to face down big fears and gain an ability and a calm and a peace, kind of a quiet peace in there that said, you know what? They don't have any control over you, Jared. I am surrounded by people who don't like me, who at times feel like they hate me. I think that there might be something wrong with me, but that I can move forward in life even with that, because I've made some things right with me, and I have control over my physical ability, and now I'm building control over my emotional capacity, and that was powerful. I still felt things intensely, like a lot of sensitive type people do and artist types do. Yeah, that's probably a little unfair. I think everybody feels things intensely unless they're kind of an unusual case. But Lin-Manuel Miranda has a line in his song, I Wrote My Way Out. There's a couple swear words, be careful. But it says oversensitive. I was called oversensitive a lot as a kid, and I was very self-conscious about it. If you were called oversensitive as a kid, you might have been self-conscious about it too. It's a compliment, as it turns out. It's an accurate compliment. We're not oversensitive, we're sensitive. And it's a good thing. That sensitivity has been deeply powerful for me. It's helped me be sympathetic and empathetic. It's helped me be able to start to tune in better to my own body and my own spirit and heart as I've gotten older and older. And really a lot of that awareness and that effort and that belief that I could change my circumstances through effort started with Rocky. That's the key thing there. It started with Rocky, that I started to believe that I could change my circumstances by working on myself, that I could improve my life by working on myself and making myself better. In fact, I think when all else fails, when there's so much out there that's going on in our life that we can't control, loss of job, loss of a loved one, lots of other things, just calamities that just sometimes seem relentless, I believe the best bet is to work on ourselves, spiritually, emotionally, physically. And that's because of Rocky. And it's also because I understand what repentance is, and I understand what the plan of salvation is. And I understand that the plan of salvation isn't about the destination. It's about the journey, right? So I am deeply grateful to Rocky. What's interesting is that Rocky 2, very similar experience. And then Rocky 3, Win Rocky from Adrian is very powerful to me. You should watch these movies. But I want to go to Rocky Balboa, the 6th movie that came out in, I think 2004 or 2005. I should know that off the top of my head. I really should. But before I do that, there's another movie called No Retreat, No Surrender. And this is a sports movie. An underdog overcomes insurmountable odds, bad guys. About a young man named Jason who lives in, I think, Seattle or something like that. He moves to Seattle, isn't it? He lives somewhere. His dad is being plagued by some bad guys. His dad runs a dojo, and his dad refuses to do some fighting that these bad guys want him to do. And so they bully him and break his leg and do terrible things and run them out of there. They move to Seattle, I believe it is, which is where Bruce Lee is buried. And this kid's dad moves there with the family, and this kid is also a martial artist. He believes he loves it. He loves karate, but he also has the wrong idea about karate. His dad says karate's for defense only, and Jason, the boy's like, whatever, I need to get these guys back. But he starts to train, and he's pretty good martial artist, but he's not as good as he thinks, and he gets, well, the crud beaten out of him by some bullies. And the spirit of Bruce Lee comes on and becomes his sensei. It's another underdog story where this young man who's full of rage, his relationships are bad, he's turning everybody away, he's alienating everybody because of all this anger. He starts to physically build. He starts to build himself physically and improve himself physically, and that leads to emotional development as well. It's very interesting as we can work on the natural man in our physical portion, in our physical aspect of our body, our actual flesh, building actual muscle and reducing the unhealthy stuff, right? That tends to lead to some other improvements. We gain confidence. We gain, again, that belief in ourselves that we truly can improve. So No Retreat, No Surrender is utterly cheesy, but it had that same effect on me. And what was important at the time was that I was basically the same age as the main character. The actor is much older, but I was basically the same age as the main character. And so it really felt real. Like, this could be me. So I ramped up my training because of it. Fun note is that Jean-Claude Van Damme, that was his first movie in the States. He played a Russian killer martial artist. And no matter how much training that this kid does, there's no way he would have actually beat Jean-Claude Van Damme, but the fight's great. And he does always, of course, it ends with this amazing move, like in Karate Kid. In any case, in about 2004, 2005, when Rocky Balboa came out, I was like, when I heard it was going to come out, I was like, what? What more is there? You know, we saw Rocky's rise and fall, and then his retaking of his own dignity in Rocky V. Rocky V was better than most people will tell you. And I'll leave it at that. What else is there for Rocky? I mean, he's got to be old. This can't be a boxing movie. None of them are boxing movies, but this can't be boxing, right? But I was intrigued, and there's no way I wasn't going to see it. I love those movies, right? So I did. I went and saw it. I was going to see movies sometimes on my own for a little while. I had a movie review website I was working on. And I went there just unsuspecting. Rocky Balboa was in his 60s in this movie. I don't know how much spoiler. I'm going to have to spoil it. So, no, I won't. I won't spoil it too much. I'll spoil it just a smidge, but not some of the big stuff. He's in a bad emotional state, but he's got a life at this point. He's got a restaurant that he's running. He's Paulie's his best friend still and all that stuff. His son is grown, played by Milo Ventimiglia. But he's just, you know, life is kind of, this is life now. This is where I ended up. I've got a restaurant. Loves his wife, of course. Paulie's still there, like I said. But there's this, the current champion boxer is a guy who hasn't been challenged for a very, very long time. And so what happens in this movie is that sports people are like, well, let's run this kind of computer simulation of this main guy. I forget the boxer's name. I'm sorry, dude. Anyway, boxing some of the legends of old. Oh, and this one with Rocky. Let's see what happens. Oh, wow, the computer simulation, of course, says that Rocky would win. Every simulation says Rocky would win. And so this young guy is like, whatever, I could take Rocky. It's an opportunity for him to build goodwill to do an exhibition match with an old retired man, Rocky Balboa, who's in his 60s, and he's got arthritis in every joint. And that's what happens. That's the story. But it's not a boxing movie. It's about a man who is closing in on the twilight of his life. And he thinks that he's basically lived his life. But then something happens and he realizes, oh, I've got more. In the movie, he says there's just something in the basement. And Paulie, what? Paulie says, what? What's in the basement, Rock? It just feels like there's this monster or something, this beast inside me. I was a once again unhealthy young man. Not young, but younger. Older than before, younger than now man. In my 20s. Is that correct? I was probably just about a 30 or 31 actually at this point. Expanding waistline, expanding everything, unfortunately. Really lost my way in some ways, physically and emotionally. And Rocky Balboa goes on another journey, and he realizes he's forgotten how to seek improvement. He's forgotten how to make effort to move forward in the journey of his life. And he can do that. He can do it even at his age. And that movie turned my life around. I'd never done any kind of competitive athletics of any kind at that point. Nothing whatsoever. I'd always liked to run and do other physical activities. I love working out. I love it. I'm blessed with that as a gift. But I never did anything like that. And I walked out of Rocky Balboa with a tightness in my throat and in my chest and some tears coming down my face. It's a beautifully affecting movie. Sylvester Stallone should have won an Oscar for his acting in that movie. It is so fine, so light touch, so beautiful, and it changed my life. By the end of that year, I was running. I was jogging super slow, but it was running, and I was preparing for my first 5K, which I would run the next year. And I did pretty well. And for many years, I did that stuff. I ran and ran and ran. And then I started doing training for a triathlon, a crazy triathlon, a sprint, just a sprint. But it's because of Rocky Balboa. And so I became much more physically capable. I started reversing the damage I'd been doing to myself by not caring enough about taking care of my body. I started rebuilding some confidence that I'd been letting drain away from me. And that movie must have come out in 2006 or 7. The only way that makes sense is if it's 2006 or 7. Yeah. Anyway, so I was in my early 30s. And I started realizing, as I started taking better control of myself physically, that there was more I could be doing in life. I could be improving my education. I had let myself slide on my education far too much by that time. And I was not moving forward in the career I needed to have in order to support my family the way I was supposed to. That movie turned me around. The movie Rocky Balboa turned me around. I was already a member of the church. I understood what repentance was about. I understood and still do and understand better, that this is a journey that I can be improving at all times and as much as I can. I can be forgiving of myself when I need to rest and be stressed because it was a rough time. But I had let go of that fire. I'd let it just go away. But when Rocky said there's something in the basement, I thought, oh, there's something not even in my basement. It's on the first floor, and there's a hunger in me. I am endlessly grateful for that, because the Spirit will talk to us in so many ways. And the grace of God will be there in so many different, voices and influences that we don't really recognize. But that was the grace of Heavenly Father. I know He saw that when I saw, because He sees everything. He knew that when I saw Rocky Balboa, I would change my life. And so Rocky Balboa got to be made just for me. And I've since let things go again. And so it's time to make some changes again. This video particularly has been helpful for me to realize that, I've let a few things go for good reasons. Honestly, I'm very busy, but I can do better. And I love being physically fit, and I love being in good shape and being strong. So I'm grateful again to Rocky, to Sylvester Stallone, man. Thank you. Because of the universal truths that are in those movies of improvement, self-improvement, building. And when you build any self-improvement, any single improvement you make in yourself builds confidence. And we can build upon each success, smallest step by smallest step by smallest step. We can build and improve. Nothing could have changed my life more at the times that I needed it than those movies. The Spirit will speak to us in a language we'll understand, even if that language is Rocky Balboa. So what Rocky movies have meant to me is that they have taught me the powerful eternal principle that repentance means change, and that I can repent of laziness and slothfulness, that I can, not feel morally compromised because I'm letting myself go physically, but I can feel a kick that I can do better, a voice whispering, come on, don't let up so much. Go, get back into it. Get back onto the road, on your bike and on your feet. Recuperate this operated on shoulder so that you can start hitting your bag again. And that's another fun thing, is that I got a heavy bag when I was younger and started pounding on that. And that built so much strength in my body. I've had 2 shoulder rebuild surgeries, one on each shoulder. This one 3.5 years ago, this one just 3 months ago. And I tell you what, the physical baseline that I was able to create because of the efforts that I made for fitness and the pounding on a bag I've done for many, many years has been invaluable in my recuperation. My recovery is always quicker than people expect it to be. I regain my movement, my motion. I regain my strength quicker than they expect it to, because of that baseline of muscle and fitness that Rocky has done for me. So what a blessing it's been in my life. Movies, right? Stories can be such a grace for us. And honestly, and this is not a personal plug for my stuff, but I write books, and I realize that I've been kind of trying to articulate better lately what it is I'm trying to do. And number one, I'm trying to write stories and make a living. But I realized that my other real number one is that I want my stories to affect people. I want people to read my stories and say, oh yeah, this character did that. I can do stuff like that too. Nothing needs to stop me. I can totally do this. So I want to change the world with my stories. I want to improve people's lives with my stories. I want to boost people's moods in their day, in their week, in their month. I want to remind them of what they're capable of by my stories. Not by some, heavy-handed, poundy message, but just because the characters won't stop. So that's my episode on how much Rocky means to me and why it means that to me. I am very curious to you, what movies or stories have kind of had an effect like that on you? Maybe it's not as much as me, because I just love this stuff. But what in your life has been that kind of catalyst for change, or that has been a gentle, loving kick in the pants to move forward and to stop letting things go so hard? Or what movie has just meant something to you on a personal level? I'd love it if you'd share. You can reach out to my email address. It's the name of the show, morningintodancingshow@gmail.com. Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And as always, if this show has been interesting to you or valuable to you, I'd love it if you'd review it, if you'd rate it on whatever platform you watched or listened to it. I'd love it if you would share it with your friends and family. It's getting a slow start. I don't care. I'm not going to stop. But thank you again, as always, so much for watching. And if you made it all the way through this 42-minute episode, thank you even more. Again, I'd love to hear from you at Morning Into Dancing Show. It's MOUR, morningintodancingshow@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter as well. Until next time, though, I encourage you to sit back, take some quiet time, and find some beauty somewhere. In the mountains, in the horizon, in the sunset, in your spouse's face, in your children's face, in their smile. And don't forget, look for some of that beauty in you, because you are God's creation. And when He sees you, He says you're good. So until next time, thank you.